This is Broad Radio. For you, by you. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Hello and welcome to Broad Radio. I'm Jo Stanley and my co-host today is Zoe Daniel. And Zoe, we made it. We're on air.
Jo, we made it. And good morning from Melbourne lockdown, Mark 5.
Yes.
Dare I say, we've got this.
Oh, God, don't say it. It's one of the phrases that we're so sick of now, aren't we? It's supposed to be encouraging, but it makes you go, oh, have we? So we are coming to you on a Friday morning because Tuesday, unfortunately, our software just melted down and didn't want to play. But that is modern life these days, isn't it? And now that a good part of the Australian population is in lockdown, Zoe, we're going to have a lot more of that and people zooming around the place. And you can't rely on technology.
What can you do other than, keep putting one foot in front of the other?
That's exactly
right. Or one
right.
keystroke. We made it. We're here.
That's right. We are here. We've got a great show for you coming up. I wanted to pay homage, in fact, to one of my favourite people, Gillian Anderson. She's so funny. And I don't know if you're in this space because you're in lockdown, but she did a little Ask Me Anything on her Instagram. And she made this admission, which I loved.
Lazy, and I don't wear a bra anymore. I can't wear a bra. I can't. No, I can't. I'm sorry, but I don't care if I reach my belly button. My breasts reach my belly button. I'm not wearing a bra anymore. It's just too fucking uncomfortable. I'm so lazy.
I love it. I mean, I've got to say, in lockdown, underwear was optional for me.
Absolutely. It's back to instantly reverting to tracksuit pants, general active wear. It all comes out of the bottom drawer. Then you also get online and go, "Ooh, do I need some more active wear for the the latest iteration of lockdown?"
That's right.
What else is there to do?
I did a gig yesterday and I was like, look at me wearing pants with a waistband. This feels weird. It was just so weird. But anyway, more power to Gillian Anderson, who doesn't wear a bra anymore. She must have small boobs, I think. Not everyone could do that.
No, and more power to her, but I think I'm not burning my bra quite yet. Just saying.
Good to know. That's good to know. So another exciting thing that we want to announce on the show today, that we are now bringing with all of our guests traditional place names to our guest titles, which we really love because we absolutely acknowledge that Australia always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And so by doing this, we really encourage all of us, I suppose, to explore Aboriginal history stories. There it is. Look at you. You're on Boonwurrung country, as am I. So we're just around the corner from each other. And it's just a joy to be able to explore Indigenous history and culture that way. And language, of course, very important. So today on the show, we are exploring and discovering the hilarious world of R-rated needlecraft when Kate Aikins from Bitchcraft Melbourne joins us. We're going to be learning our rights if we are injured in a public place due to someone else's negligence, thanks to Maurice Blackburn. And in just a moment, Zoe, we're going to get your take on Julia Banks' claims about the toxic culture in Parliament, and the CEO of Gender Equity Victoria, Tanja Kovac, will be joining us in that conversation as well. That's all coming up after this. Broad Radio is proudly supported by Chemist Warehouse. Chemist Warehouse, great savings every day. Down here, bit of housekeeping at the top of the show. If you are watching on YouTube, it'd be awesome if you could like and subscribe. That's really helpful. If you're watching on Facebook, it would be lovely if you followed along with your comments and any questions that you might have along the way as well. And if you could like and follow us, that would be awesome. You can always catch up on any of our episodes via podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, with Broad Radio on the go. And we always invite you to enter our More to Say poll. It's one question every week. And this week, if you answer this very heated question, I mean, it's the hard-hitting issues here, Zoe. The question is, do you go a bar of soap or body wash? What are your thoughts?
Soap. All the way.
Cannot understand it. I am a body wash girl and I just can't fathom the bar of soap. Doesn't it feel a little bit like you're in the depression? Like, I just feel like...
Well, I just don't find body wash all that effective, Joe. Maybe this is, a generational thing or something. But also it could be a factor of having to travel to all sorts of weird places over my life. And often to those weird places, I have literally taken a bar of soap with me because you cannot guarantee if you're landing into a natural disaster, refugee situation, conflict zone, or whatever it might be, that there will be soap. So carrying a bar of soap is a lot easier than carrying a bottle of body wash.
Yeah,
so I don't know.
Okay, so now you have brought the most unbelievable cred to a bar of soap, and that is that you have been in war zones. That is forgivable, okay? And it's the only time, and I have this debate, it seems often, that's the only time that I think it's entirely fair enough. If you're a camper, maybe. If you're in a war zone, sure, bar of soap. Fair enough. And now I stand corrected. For me, it's body wash all the way. Anyway, if you go to broadradio.com.au and you enter this very hotly contested question, this poll, you go in the running to win this beautiful 10-cell cotton sheet set from Sleepmaker, 500 thread count, worth $539. How beautiful is that? So it's worthwhile having your say on this hotly contested issue. Now, to something actually much more important. It has been just over a week since former Liberal MP Julia Banks released her book Power Play, and we learned of what she says is a toxic and sexist culture in Parliament and the menacing and controlling behaviour from the Prime Minister and what Banks described as his bully boys. Zoe, what have you made of her claims?
Well, I mean, it was pretty revealing initially reading some of her claims, particularly about the demeanour of the Prime Minister, but also the general sort of systematic takedown, if you like. I think that's what I found most revealing and also concerning about it. I can't say I was particularly surprised, but I think the way that Julia Banks outlines what happened to her in Parliament, or her claims of what happened, is pretty stark. And I think what really stuck in my mind the most and what concerned me the most is that sort of cancel culture almost of her, of how can we make her look weak? How can we make the fact that she's, for example, in the end decided to exit the party because of the way that she was treated and the behaviour of those around her, her fault? Yeah. And I think that will resonate with a lot of women, particularly women who have sort of worked their way through the workforce into senior roles where they're surrounded by a lot of male culture, where there is a sort of deliberate, if subtle, but deliberate undermining of them because of their, or related to their gender, to somehow erode their credibility and their position.
Yes, I mean, I have witnessed it, and I've I think experienced it myself in the media, that if you are outspoken, if you are overly emotional, then people just assume that you're a bit unhinged and, you can't be trusted, there's no credibility, and, I suppose in a corporate world or a political sense, you're not going to be advanced in your career if that's what people are saying about you.
Well, yeah, and this sense that to call something out is overly emotional or unhinged. And that, for example, she relates the fact that Christopher Pyne, and the others have reported this as well, that Christopher Pyne commented that he was disappointed that she decided to leave the party because, that was all that she would ever be remembered for. Well, I don't think that, but that's, sort of inserting a view about her to take the focus off what's actually happening in our parliament, in those leadership circles, where the focus shouldn't be on Julia Banks, much as she's written a book about this, but it should be on the behaviour that led her to write that book.
Yeah.
And I think, the other thing, Joe, that's interesting is that the fact that she's been able to step into this and put this book out is emblematic of sort of where we are in regard to this debate in a positive way, that, we are actually having much more direct conversations about this stuff. It doesn't mean that it's less polarized in many ways, and it remains controversial, and it definitely generates debate and people have strong opinions, but
we've been just showing this photo of Julia Banks in 2018 when she announced that she was leaving the Liberal Party, and I remember that so distinctly as a moment where I thought it gave me chills at how lonely a place she was in, and how they, not by accident, were turning their back on her. Very nasty scenes, and what she has gone through, according to her book, is really quite, I think, must be quite traumatic. And as I said, when I watched what she was talking about and sharing her experiences, I did get a sense of familiarity to what she was talking about. And so I am really interested to hear from someone who knows a little more about how broadly this kind of culture exists. I want to know, is it worse in Parliament than anywhere else? Because I think we all have experienced in many different industries that kind of behaviour. So to discuss this with us, we welcome CEO Gender Equity Victoria, Tanja Kovac. Hi there, Tan.
Good morning, Joe. Hi, Zoe.
Tanja, what is your observation? I imagine at Gender Equity Victoria that you hear of many different instances of sexual discrimination and gender inequality in workplaces. Is it worse in Parliament?
I spent 10 years as the director and chair of Emily's List Australia, which brings progressive women into Parliament, helps them get elected. And my experience of having been involved in that organisation at a fairly senior level was that it's quite common for there to be gendered violence and incidents of sexual assault and sexual harassment within in parliaments. It's not uncommon.
Tanja, to what degree is this discouraging women from going into the political sphere? And I wonder, with the conversations that we've been having over the last few years, whether that is better or worse when it comes to encouraging or discouraging women from actually entering politics.
One of the things that became really difficult at the end of my time supporting Emily's List Australia was I too had been a young, enthusiastic woman really interested in politics when I first started my involvement in a feminist political organisation. But by the end of it, it became really hard to be as enthusiastic about young women who were really deeply committed to politics getting into it. And I found that more of a struggle towards the end, because by that stage a lot of the blinkers around what actually happens in politics to women had been removed, and young women wanted me to mentor them, and I had to think, what was this really going to mean for them? What was it that they would need to prepare themselves for if they were going to enter into this environment? And there's a lot, they have to be prepared to cope with the attacks on their physical appearance. They're held to an incredible standard around their physical appearance, more than a man. They have to look absolutely stunning on a core flute compared to a bloke, and in order to even get themselves pre-selected. They also have to cope with what I think is a fairly deep connection between, sexual politics and politics itself. It is true that life is easier often if you are in power couples and you've got, relationships that are across different groupings within political parties. And it can be a complicated minefield managing all of those sort of sexual and gender dynamics while at the same time trying to make an impact for public policy.
And
Sorry, Joe, I just want to follow up to say that because, we tend to think of young women entering politics, but in Julia Banks' case, she's an experienced lawyer, corporate executive who entered politics, with a sense of, well, I've worked my way up this difficult male-dominated corporate ladder, and yet she's still experienced all of the undermining. I mean, her stories of the pre-selection process are absolutely mind-boggling, where she's, just treated like a child by a lot of the blokes around her. So it's sort of a twofold thing, isn't it? Because it's not only those young, ambitious women who might think, yes, I have a future in politics. It's also these women with so much expertise and so much to offer who perhaps get to, 50 and think, okay, there's a lot I could do in leadership, then go, nah.
And in fact, Zoe, I would say to you that my advice now would be that it would be far better for women to be older entering into those environments, in part because I think it is easier to manage it, to be stronger and more forceful when you're of a certain age, and less vulnerable. But, I thought it was really telling. Julia's biggest comment, which I thought was very telling, was just how much worse she thought the political environment was compared to the corporate environment, how there was so much more work to be done in the political environment compared to, business in Australia, that they just hadn't caught up. And I think that there's truth in that. We have a really bizarre Westminster adversarial system, with an hour or so to ask questions of your representatives in Parliament that, dates back 200-300 longer years. And it's just not really fit for purpose anymore, that structure. And that adversarial approach is not really fit for structure. And I think women are not just questioning their how they're treated within that environment, they're questioning the culture that creates that kind of environment and encourages it. There's something weird about, it's basic. I sometimes describe it, that it's a bit like, a bunch of kids in student politics heading up to a conference every 6 weeks or so in Canberra, where they think no one's watching and that they can play these undergraduate games. And there's a bit of that.
Yeah, it feels very distasteful at, the most minor version of it is very distasteful, and at its most extreme, obviously, very, very damaging and concerning. But I feel as though it's not just the system, it's being exploited by people, isn't it? Like, they're making use of the imbalance of power and that culture to manipulate women.
Look, I think there have been incredible strides in this space. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, there were really no women whatsoever on the bench. No one on either the red or green couches. So there have been some political parties that have put effort into trying to tip the balance, but there's still gaps. And I think, the exposure, when you don't have a critical mass, when you don't have gender equal numbers, there's always a risk that the culture is not going to, be gender equal. And that's what Gen Vic is very, deeply committed to, having conversations about why a gender equal culture is better for good governance, why it's better in terms of the financial and economic outcomes that you have, why it's just better for even from an anti-corruption perspective. There's heaps of research across the world now that says that gender equality is basically a much better tool for keeping governments accountable than anything else that we have in terms of structures within our system.
How do you think the party political system contributes to this? Part of me sort of wonders whether the two-party system fosters a kind of gang mentality not only in regard to gender, because, a lot's been said about pre-selection processes and factions, for example. One of the things that's been brought up repeatedly of late is the rise of independence and the power that independence can have on the crossbenchers in various ways. Is that a space for women to step into more? And indeed, many already have, and we're starting to see a bit of a groundswell in that regard.
I mean, it's very interesting seeing how many women are choosing to go down an independent path. But I think that, I think there have been changes. I mean, the Labor Party has significantly changed its commitment to gender equality. It has a 50-50 target by 2025, and it's not very far off achieving that target. So there's been culture change. That doesn't mean that I'm sure by the time Kate Jenkins finishes her investigation into Parliament, I don't think there will be a political party that is a clean skin in the reporting. I think that we're fairly confident that there will be problems across all of the Parliament. So what's the systemic issue? We think we actually need to do a gender audit of the Parliament. Let's have a look at the physical space. Let's have a look at the practices. Let's look at how the workforce is created, both from a support mechanism, the supporting workforce, but also the parliamentary workforce itself, and analyse whether it really is gender equal, and what do we need to do to reshape it so that it looks like us now. I don't see that we should be contained anymore by a Westminster system that, isn't serving us in the way that it should.
Tanja, I always sort of look at our Parliament and think, okay, how does that relate to, the people that I buy my groceries off? And how does that relate to, my mum and my sisters and my friends? And, how do we make it matter? Because it feels like a disconnect, and there's been a lot of rage this year, and I know that you're running this campaign, #EnoughIsEnough, but what can we do in our everyday lives, and how can we, establish change wherever we see this kind of gender inequality?
Well, definitely participate. Don't not participate. That's the first thing. Knowledge is power. Being able to understand what's going on in politics is pretty important, because at the end of the day, everything that is decided there impacts on you. Look at COVID-19. Women, the first project that was chucked off JobKeeper was childcare. Women have got a lot to lose by turning their head away from being engaged in politics. And I think we saw from the March for Justice that we know that politics is beyond just, voting at the end of the day. Sometimes it is called for you to either take to the street, go and make your face and your presence known so that you get heard. I don't think we'd have Kate Jenkins' report and investigation happening. I don't think that we would have a Women's Safety Summit happening in the next couple of weeks if it wasn't for the advocacy of ordinary Australian women who just said enough is enough. Like, I just don't want the people who are making decisions for me, also being people who jerk off on a table. I mean, who wants that?
Oh my God.
Who wants that? I mean, it just doesn't it just beg the belief that we're even having this discussion?
But when you say it like that, Tanja, somehow I had forgotten that part of this year's story.
I haven't. No. Oh my God. Like, I'm just trying to think what other workplace any of us have ever been in where that would be like and I think there's something about the culture of the place that is encouraging this lad culture, this we're untouchable, and I think that needs to be broken down. Yeah,
it's interesting. I don't know if this was your experience, Zoe, of the people in your life who may not be connected with politics generally. It was that story of the jerking off on the table that made people who my mum, who maybe he isn't so engaged. She's like, oh, that's enough. Oh, come on. Like, you know, that really kind of hit home for a lot of people. Did you have that experience, Zoe?
But I think there's a sense that there's no line.
Yeah.
You know, why is there no boundary for our leaders when everyone else is adhering to boundaries? And it's a question of, why are we adhering to decisions made by you for us when you're not actually towing any sort of line, plainly? And it just erodes the credibility of the people and the institution. And unfortunately, I think that some people then engage more in politics, but other people just switch off from it because there's a sense of, I just can't deal with this. So I feel like that's what we're grappling a little bit with right now.
But Zoe, don't you also get concerned that the other end of this extreme is that people then pursue very extremist, individualistic politics? And I think the lack of integrity of some of the political class has resulted in there being a race towards a desperation of something else that is going to create the change. And that's really risky. That's how you end up with Trumps. Because when they're talking, the reason Trump's drain the swamp had resonance is because for too long people have thought that politics is full of crocodiles who are not behaving appropriately, who are dangerous, you know, and that the recreation of that culture is on every political party. Every political party has an obligation to ensure now that we have got a completely safe and equal parliament. We have to, because how am I supposed to advocate for changes to, you know, laws in relation to family violence, ending gendered hate crime? How are we supposed to change any of that if you don't have the integrity of the decision makers?
Yes. Well, it's up to us, I feel, at my level, because I'm not having any impact on laws, Tanja. What I'm doing and what I think every woman can do is, you know, maintain the rage. It's a cliche, but that's what we're here for, hey, to just say, nah, I can make my voice heard at the polling booth, and I can also just talk to my friends and say, well, we're not going to cop this anymore, hey.
Absolutely. And, you know, we've got a fantastic project. In fact, Julia Banks and former Senator Trish Crossan, so we've got a former Labor MP and a former Liberal and Independent working together on a project for us to safeguard women in politics. And, you know, one of our first things was to try to get an investigation like Kate Aikins up, and we're really happy that that exists, but we still need support and voices coming in to say, well, let's do a gender audit of our parliaments. And we're also looking at just how difficult online spaces are for women politicians as well. So journalists, as you know, Zoe and Joe, cop a fair bit of abuse for being outspoken advocates, particularly if they start talking about women. Broad radio, I can't imagine, Joe, how many attacks you've probably started to have.
I think we're too little so far. Once people know what we're doing, I'm sure it will come.
It will come. You know, yes. We're concerned about journalists and sports people, women who are in the public eye, and what, you know, when they're targeted, what does that say to young girls who are looking to aspire to them? So we're interested in pursuing those projects as part of that work.
Well, thank you so much, Tanja Kovac, CEO of Gender Equity Victoria. It's been lovely to speak with you this morning. I'm sure we'll talk to you again sometime soon.
You too, and I'm a body wash, peppermint body wash.
See? I would have pitched that. I'm happy that you shared that. Poor old Zoe. Zoe's been in a war zone though, so I forgive the bar of soap there. Thanks so much.
I'm an outlier. I've always been an outlier.
Okay, we'll have more Broad Radio after this.
In your arena, there's only one race to win. Your own. You never stop, never quit, never look back. You push and test your limits until there are none left. Fuel your performance with INC Dynamic Way to keep you going.
Broad Radio, talking inspo we love, info we need, and sharing more of us. Watch and listen live every Tuesday 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time at broadradio.com.au or find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and LinkedIn at Broad Radio Oz. Talk to us live. Call on 1300 8 Broad. Catch up on demand anytime, anywhere, every time, everywhere. On the train, we'll be here. 2 a.m. existential crisis? We've got you covered. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Well, at Broad Radio, we are growing because of the partners that have come with us on this journey. And so we say thank you to Saba Organics, who have partnered with us. They are one of the world's only 100% certified organic range of skin and body care. Whether it's hand wash, hand sanitizer, or cleaning products for our home, we don't want to be covering our skin in toxins or chemicals. But how do we really know what goes into the products that we're using? Well, what I've just discovered is that even when a product is described as natural ingredients, those ingredients have generally been exposed to toxic herbicides and pesticides in farming, which obviously is damaging to the earth and also not great for our body. But 100% certified organic, which Saba Organics is, it means it's guaranteed no aluminium, no sulfate or parabens and no toxic chemicals. And Saba Organics work directly with Australian organic farmers, growers and suppliers, so they can offer the most accessible certified organics at the lowest prices. I love the Saba Organics lemon tea tree and kunzia hand wash, but you can check out all of their beautiful range at sabaorganics.com. Zoe, I don't want you to feel like we're ganging up on you, but already on social media today, on Facebook, we've had an overwhelming love for body wash.
But I'm just curious, Joe, I presume Saba Organics do body wash, so I'm going to be heading down to Chemist Warehouse after this.
Coincidentally, they do a beautiful body wash and it's 100% certified organic. What more can I say? But like I say, I acknowledge you've been in a war zone, which is the coolest thing I've heard anyone say. And one day I must actually stop down and do a full interview with you about your career. We're going to slot that into Broad Radio because you're just so incredible. And I pinch myself that we have you on the show. But we do run this More to Say poll every week, and we are asking you about body wash and soap today. But in the last week, we asked the question, are you crafty? Not as in sneaky, but as in good with your hands. Do you do craft work? And I'm so impressed with the Broad Radio audience. 47% say that they love their creativity and they're very crafty. Do you yourself, do you get into some knitting, any sewing, your world?
Absolutely useless and hopeless at all of those things. And I do think now, in my dotage, that I wish that I'd learnt to sew when I was a teenager, so that it would come naturally to me. My kids, if they need something mended, they'll ask, "Oh, Mum, can we take this to our friend, Min, who can sew?" Because they know that I'm useless.
Yeah,
it'd be lovely to be able to sew well.
My best friend Tanya is incredible with the sewing machine. Everything she'll rock up and I go, "Did you make that?" And she's fully wearing something that looks like
amazing.
Not a horrific, horror show that I would create. So we outsource all of our crafting in our house as well. So there's no shame. But while I'm not crafty, I do love swearing. So I'm excited. I'm very thrilled to welcome Kate Aikins from Bitchcraft Melbourne, introducing to us the world of R-rated Stitchcraft. Hello there, Kate.
Good morning. I'm good. How are you both?
Well, very, very well, and excited to meet you. Why swearing and Stitchcraft?
It all started a couple of years ago. So Bitchcraft is myself, Kate, and my friend Katie. We met in Spain probably like 13 years ago. And she was hosting a greatest morning tea. And so she'd put on a beautiful spread of baking, and she's like, come over, we'll do some cross stitch. I'm like, awesome, cute. I haven't done that since I was like maybe 9 years old. But I'll show you what it was that we stitched. It's not really Nana approved.
It says, I can only make out, what's it say? Fuck this, what? Shit.
This shit. It's a little bit how we're feeling about lockdown right now. And yeah, we were just doing it over a couple of glasses of wine, and we're like, this is awesome. And so we're like, let's make it a thing. So we've kind of just expanded it. Most of our patterns are quite crass, and we found, obviously no one planned lockdown, but we found it actually got a lot of traction when people were inside over winter, wanting things to do. It's something that's quite like mindful, like it's a lot of counting and stitching, but you get like a lovely curse word product at the end of it. So yeah, that's sort of how it all became.
You know, obviously we're back in lockdown again now, so people are going to be like, oh, this might be very relevant over the next couple of weeks. But you know, what is your background with craft and sewing and stitching? You know, is this something that you've been into over your life? And you referenced like, I haven't done that since I was a kid. So is there a bit of a nostalgia factor there for you?
Yeah, definitely. My mum was always super duper crafty. She was a quilter and a knitter. Like she'd always be in front of the TV doing something. And I think just something about that, I guess, transferred to me. So yeah, my background, I actually went to university straight out of high school. But the highlight for me every year was this architecture ball that would happen. And every year I'd design and make a dress. And yeah, I just found that just being creative just nourishes my soul. And then from there I went on to do a fashion degree. And then, yeah, so I've always just had sewing, crafting. I love doing things with my hands. There's to the left of me at the moment, there's actually a dog ramp I just made on the weekend for my dachshund puppy. So yeah, just being able to do something with my hands in front of the TV. In fact, I was actually just starting a cross stitch while I was waiting to come on. So yeah, it's just a really great thing that I guess has just always been in our life. But I feel like, you know, stitching flowers on a doily is not really our vibe. I think anyone who's met Katie and myself know that we're quite potty mouthed.
Well, I too am quite potty mouthed, to my daughter's horror. She's 12 and she's of this generation where she's like, Mum, such a rude word. And I'm like, how did I produce this? But the thing that I love too is that there's a real history, I think, of, you know, sewing circles and knitting circles where women would get together, and it would be almost quite a subversive thing, you know, at a time when often women weren't able to speak about any kind of activism publicly. Is there an element of that for you?
I think the reason why we started it is, well, I guess it's kind of fun to be of a little like fuck you, but it's also, you know, as you get older, it's a little bit harder to go out and meet new kind of like-minded people. So I guess, I mean, we've called it Bitchcraft, but it's really open to everyone of all genders, but we do find typically it's women. But we were at an event called Sheila's Shakedown earlier this year, which is just this amazing event with, it's pretty much all typically women, and they all just ride motorbikes and they just don't give a fuck. And we were asked to do a session there, and I can't remember the lady's name who I spoke to, but she was talking about how cross stitch and crafting, it used to have like hidden meanings in what they were creating to communicate with each other, like these secret codes. And I'm like, didn't even know that, but that is bloody cool. So it's nice to know that the history of crafting kind of has that little subliminal messaging in it. Kind of just makes it even more fun.
Well, Kate, I think the word of the week this week is shit show. And I'm just curious what ideas you have for, you know, future designs and words that we can, you know, stick up on our mantelpieces, especially in this, you know, continually evolving COVID situation, which, you know, you could use lots of different rude adjectives to describe, frankly.
I actually just posted one to our Instagram, this one that I was working on. This is actually the finished pattern. I may have tagged a couple of our new politicians in it.
That is so great.
I was feeling about it. But yeah,
I just love
it. And I definitely make a dumpster fire collaborative pattern to commemorate the last 18 months or so.
What I love is imagining an elderly lady, very genteel, you know, getting down to her stitchcraft, but that's what she's actually creating. Have you had, you know, that sort of older generation who traditionally might love the craft world, but also embracing language that might not be so traditionally theirs?
I wish I had a copy of it. There's a really funny meme that went around. It was a lady on an aeroplane stitching something, and she looked, you know, quite older, but it was just a completely rude cross stitch. I'm like, that's the best. But at one of our first classes we were hosting them in a pre-pandemic world at Noisy Ritual in Brunswick East, and you know, we have a very open door policy, and this lady came over. She's like, what are you working on? And we're like, oh, this. And she had a look at the patterns and she pissed herself laughing. She's like, oh my God, I have to show my partner. His mum was always a massive cross stitcher, but, you know, she was super religious. She would absolutely die if she saw these. And I'm like, good, we're doing it right then.
I love it. It's so great. Well, I embrace language like this. I don't know about you. Are you much of a swearer, Zoe?
I think people who know me well would say absolutely.
And we can purchase your patterns, can't we?
Yeah, so in a non-pandemic time, we do teach classes, and we keep them pretty small, just so we can teach people the basics of cross stitch. Yet effective, and best enjoyed over a glass of wine. But our patterns are online at our website, bitchcraftmelb.com, and we're also on Facebook and Instagram, which is bitchcraftmelb. And if you'd like to, you know, check out our classes in a post-lockdown time, I guess we'll post all the information there when we can. We were supposed to host a class this weekend, which unfortunately won't go ahead, but, you know, we'll just stay in and cross-stitch and stay safe.
I personally think it's the perfect thing if you're organising like a hen's afternoon, sort of like a hen's lunch or something, like a novelty gift. It's like the most joyous thing to sit down and just be stitching away nice cock. I think that's awesome. I love it.
Well, instead of having, you know, penis-shaped everything, you could just have the cross stitch. So yeah, that's something we do. And they also make really great gifts for people. So if, you know, there's someone you like or maybe someone you don't like, they make an excellent present.
Oh, it's so great. Thank you so much, Kate Aikins from Bitchcraft Melbourne. It's been a joy to meet you.
Nice to talk to you both too. And I am a soap and body wash gal.
Oh,
controversial.
You oscillate between the two.
I have to wash my hands with soap when I get into the shower, but then I'm all about the body wash because I just find it a bit more gentle and it just smells so good.
Do you know what? I would like, now that we're talking about crafting and sort of all this artisanal art, I want to mention that there are some beautiful handmade soaps out there by local artists, and I really love that, actually. I don't want to betray our artist community by suggesting we should always go to body wash. You've reminded me of that there, Kate.
Bye.
Okay, thanks so much. We'll have more
Thanks,
Broad Radio after this.
I'm in a new strategy.
Well, here at Broad Radio, we've been working with Maurice Blackburn Lawyers since we began in January, actually, bringing you information about your rights, because we're all about empowerment here, and knowledge, of course, is power. So today we're going to be talking about public liability, and to do that, we welcome the head of public liability at Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, Dimi Ioannou. Hi there, Dimi.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. I've got to say, I'm kind of vaguely aware of what public liability is because I'm a business owner. But if I wasn't someone who owns a business, I might not even know really what public liability is. Can you explain it to us?
Sure, that's a really good question. It's really important that all businesses and organisations take out public liability insurance, Joe, because it protects their business if they are being sued. It covers it covers their cost of a legal defence, but it also covers people who are not who have been injured as a result of an accident, and they will need to ultimately pay out compensation.
But what we're talking about is, say, I'm an individual, I may be in a public space, somehow I become injured because of someone's negligence, basically.
Yes. Well, at Maurice Blackburn, we see very broad and wide cases. Some of the common types of cases we see in our public liability department include your slips and falls in supermarkets and any other retail outlets, dog attacks, for example, if you're walking your dog in a park and your dog attacks another patron, they can potentially look at suing you under your home and contents insurance, boat and water sporting accidents, sporting injuries, food poisoning. We also see cases that include accidents occurring in rental properties, tripping on a footpath or any other public place, physical assaults that occur in pubs and nightclubs, and bicycle accidents that do not involve a vehicle. We also look at product liability claims, and what that means, Joe, is that, for example, if you were to purchase a bike and that bicycle was faulty and you suffered a serious injury, then you can potentially look at suing the manufacturer and supplier.
Okay, so we all, I think, have heard of people, if it hasn't happened to us, where someone slips on a chip, in a shopping centre. That's an instance where you're going to really investigate what's available to you for public liability. But if it's an individual versus an individual, what's the cover there through my house and contents insurance?
Well, that's correct. We don't normally pursue claims against individuals. We always look at claims against a company or an organisation, and that is because a company and an organisation always takes out public liability insurance to have protection, to protect their businesses against claims made by third parties.
Okay, so, I've heard a lot of stories, and you read about the craziness, say, in America, right, where someone has drunk a coffee that's way too hot and they've sued the cafe. We hear those stories a lot. Is this what it's like in Australia? Are we a particularly litigious society, and what's available to us?
Well, fundamentally, we operate under the same system, which is a common law system. But in Australia, and in particular in Victoria, where I practice, in order to pursue a public liability claim, there are certain thresholds that apply. And you do need to show that you have suffered a significant permanent injury, but also you need to prove that there was a third party at fault, and that person or company failed to provide you a safe environment and caused your injury.
Okay, so that's fairly specific. Can you give us some examples of cases that you've worked with?
Sure. I can give you a particular case example in relation to a food allergy case that I was involved in, which was quite sad. And in this case, my client's wife attended brunch with her girlfriends at mid Saturday morning, and she specifically, when ordering her meal, told the wait staff that she was allergic to dairy. Unfortunately, she was given the incorrect meal because there was a breakdown between the kitchen and the wait staff. As a result of this, she was given a dairy meal. She suffered an allergic reaction. The ambulance arrived, but unfortunately, she passed away in the ambulance 45 minutes later. And when this client came to see me, Joe, it was never about the money. He wanted to tell his story. He wanted access to justice, but more importantly, he wanted to educate the community about food allergies and for people who worked in the hospitality industry.
I feel like that's a really common story that I've heard in all of my conversations with Maurice Blackburn this year, that people want to know that it won't happen to anyone else.
Well, this particular client continues to advocate in public forums in relation to allergies and anaphylaxis, and he keeps wanting to raise this important public safety issue because he doesn't want another family to endure what he went through.
So when someone experiences such an incredible loss like that, it's really important to know that you don't have to just be a victim around this, that there is opportunity for some kind of compensation. Are there other instances that you can share that's maybe something a little bit different, a little bit surprising?
Yes, I was also involved in a very sad bullying case, and in that case, my client experienced severe bullying by classmates at school, and she suffered a serious psychological reaction to the point where she was hospitalized. She was being victimized and bullied online and on various other social platforms, including, cyberbullying is a very, very big issue in Australia at the moment. And the school was notified in relation to the ongoing bullying by the mother. However, it continued. And in this particular case, the school failed to provide a safe environment, but also more importantly, they failed to adhere to their bullying policy that they have in place. And schools have a responsibility, Joe, to keep children safe. And in this case, they breached their duty of care to my client.
So they were able to make a claim?
Yes, they were.
You know what I find really fascinating is that whenever you are, in business or at any time when you're dealing with the public, of course there's a duty of care, but I suppose that people don't really put that much emphasis on it, but the law is there to remind you that people matter.
That's right. The law is there to protect you and to also let you know that you have a right to pursue a claim where you have been wronged by, especially when it's by a negligent third party who has caused you to suffer significant injuries.
Have you seen changes in some industries or shifts in the way that we kind of go about our businesses because of claims within public liability?
Yes, we have, Joe. As I mentioned in relation to the earlier case study in relation to food allergies, the federal government called a public inquiry into allergies and anaphylaxis. And my client and I co-drafted submissions that were put forward in relation to this inquiry, and we were both called to provide those submissions at the public hearing, which we attended together. And one of the recommendations we made was that we wanted to see greater safety measures put in place in hospitality and venues, but also it was really pleasing to see that one of the submissions was accepted, which was to provide greater emphasis in food services and food preparation training on allergies and anaphylaxis, because one of the strong submissions made by us was that lives depend on it. More than 4 million Australians live with allergies, including many young children. So, making a mistake can be deadly.
Also, when you think about the hospitality industry, so many of the workers there are young and they don't want that responsibility. They don't want to know that they may be causing harm on someone.
That's exactly right, and that's why we advocated for greater training to be put in place in how to prepare food for those people who do suffer an allergy. One of the recommendations that we also made was to have an EpiPen in all hospitality venues. So if someone does suffer an allergic reaction, there's an EpiPen on site in case the individual doesn't have one in their bag or it's expired. So it's really important that there are greater systems put in place for those people who suffer with allergies in Australia.
Dimi, I've thought this many times over the last 6 months that you, in your profession, must hear some pretty difficult stories to hear. How is that for you?
We do hear a lot of very sad cases, and it's evident by the 2 case examples I gave you earlier. But we, at Maurice Blackburn, we have EAP that's available to all our staff, where we attend, twice a year or on a need basis to be able to share our stories, but also to be able to speak to someone about the sad stories that we are dealing with.
Well, I'm really appreciative of the time that I've spent with you and everyone at Maurice Blackburn this year. I've learned a great deal, and most importantly, I've learned that to get advice, because we shouldn't be fearful to find out what our rights are.
That's exactly right, Jo. At Maurice Blackburn, we offer a first free initial consultation, so it doesn't hurt to get advice and then make a decision later as to how you want to proceed with your claim. There are time limitation periods that apply, so you don't want to be statute barred in bringing a claim forward. With public liability claims, you only have 3 years to make a claim, or if you are a child or a person under disability, you have 6 years to make a claim. But more importantly, I always say to my clients, if you have suffered an injury, it's really important that you keep a diary of all your out-of-pocket expenses, the list of treaters that you've seen, if you're experiencing financial hardship and you're unable to work, to keep a list of all the days you've taken off work, but also more importantly, take photos of where the accident occurred. And if there are witnesses, please take their names and numbers, because they are very crucial in your claim.
Well, as always, that is absolutely brilliant advice. Thank you so much, Dimi. It's been really wonderful to speak with you.
Thank you, Jo.
I'm in a new stratosphere.
Well, Zoe, it's been delightful to share this show with you. I'm glad we finally got it to air after our disasters earlier in the week. But it's allowed us to announce this beautiful thing, which I'm so excited by, which is the unveiling of this amazing statue of Nova Peris. That's in Melbourne's Federation Square. It's such a beautiful statue, and I didn't realise that Nova Peris was our first Aboriginal Olympic gold medalist. I didn't know that when she played for the Hockey Roos.
You know, it feels like not very long ago that happened, which is making me feel quite old, because Nova Peris has done so much. Like, really, what an extraordinary athlete and person. You know, 2 sports, successful in both, and then to go on to a career in politics and to be a very prominent woman in our society, and an Aboriginal woman at that. And it's just awesome, amazing. Yeah. And also, you know, Jo, it goes to the need to not only showcase our Indigenous high achievers, but also our female high achievers when it comes to sporting statues. And I know our friend Ange Pipos is very keen on this conversation, but you know, there aren't actually very many statues of our female sporting greats, and there should be more.
No, absolutely. It obviously is important that we get parity in our statues, as we would like to see parity everywhere else in society. And in fact, this particular statue is a part of a campaign by 2 amazing artists, Gilly and Mark. They started Statues for Equality, and they basically work around the world to establish more statues of women. In Melbourne, only 1.5% of the statues that we have in Melbourne are women. And I'm not sure Australia-wide what the figure would be, but I'm imagining it wouldn't be much different. So that statue has been created by Gilly and Mark in conjunction with Yorta Yorta and Wurrung artist Jandamara Cad, and it's really beautiful. I really love it. Do you know what though? I've just done some research around the games, which start in 7 days. That's crept up. I can't believe it.
I know. My son is the sporting expert in our family, and the other day I was like, when are the Olympics again? I mean, I feel like everything's so out of whack because of COVID, and of course, you know, the Olympics aren't supposed to even be happening this year, because normally I would be right onto that. I love the Olympics. I will sit there and watch it obsessively. You know, Jo, maybe we'll be still in lockdown by then. So then we can just watch the Olympics around the clock. No, I'm not wishing that on us.
No, but there was an amazing story in the conversation today, actually, around gender equality in the Olympics. And these are things I didn't even know. And like you, I've been watching the Olympics since I was a child. Did you know that this is the first year that women will be competing in the 1,500 metre freestyle? Like, until now, it's only been 800 metres. I didn't even know that there wasn't a female version of the great Kieran Perkins race. What?
Right.
That's so...
And that, now that you mentioned that race, it's so funny because as soon as you mention 1,500 metres, I just think of that race, and that also makes me feel old. But the other thing that makes me feel old is that I did cover the Olympics in Greece. That was one of my sort of highlight assignments in my earlier journalism career. And no, I had absolutely no clue that there was that disparity around female athletes and the sort of marquee events. So, look, baby steps still, but at least we're seeing some forward movement.
Yeah, that's right. So they're saying that for the first time, women will be given more prominence, or the same prominence, let's say that even, the same prominence with their competitions in the broadcasting. And apparently in the last weekend, it's almost all male sports usually, because apparently, I don't know, are they bigger ticket items? How dumb. So yeah, they're saying that's going to change, which is really great. But let's just remember two things that this article highlights, which is that the leadership in the IOC, not a lot of gender equality there. And also when you look at the way women's sporting events are reported and commentated, it's often speaking about aesthetics rather than the athletes, and infantilizing and sexualizing often the women who are, let's face it, the world's greatest athletes.
Absolutely. And harking back to our lovely friend Ms. Pipos, she wrote an article this week that I 100% agree with, which is, we are women, we are not ladies. So male sport commentators, take note. Every time you speak of the ladies, you disenfranchise your entire female audience who feel very undermined by that kind of language. So just change it.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a ripping article from our friend Angela Pipos on siren.com.au, which is an awesome publication. Check that out as well. It's been delightful as always, Zoe, to share the show with you.
Always a pleasure, Jo. Enjoy your lockdown.
Oh my God. Should we go back to bed? Is that what happens? Oh my God. And good luck with, and to everybody in the country actually who's in lockdown and dealing with remote learning. Godspeed. We're thinking of you.